Hello, this is Kimberly Newman with the Poly Grant Assistance Program team, here to walk you through available and upcoming grant funding in the education space. As a part of the new stimulus that was approved at the end of 2020, there is $81 billion allotted for education. Specific to K through 12, ESSER 2 has $54.3 billion, which is 4 times the amount that was included in the CARES funding. Higher ed has 22.7 billion, or 2 times what was received for CARES, and the governor's emergency education relief funding is 4.1 billion, which includes 1.3 billion for sub-grants to be designated by the governors for local education agencies and institutes of higher education most impacted by COVID, as well as 2.75 billion for non-public schools. A deeper look into K through 12, looking at the previous ESSER 1 CARES funding versus the new ESSER 2 funding that's a part of the CAA or the new stimulus. A couple of noteworthy elements for review. ESSER 1 funding must be spent before spending ESSER 2 and must be tracked separately. Funds can be used to cover pre-award costs back to March 13th, 2020, the same beginning date as ESSER 1. And the ESSER 2 deadline to spend these funds is September 30th, 2023. For higher education, a look at what's eligible. Distance education equipment is an allowable expenditure. And given the large focus on reopening and vaccination, school-based health at the college is a top priority. Universities with large endowments will have their allocations reduced, so just a flag there. What matters when deciding on education technology? It needs to be flexible and affordable, readily available. Inventory count matters, and it needs to provide value beyond the pandemic. All elements to consider in making your decision. A highlight of more funding to come is the $1.9 trillion proposal from the Biden administration. A couple flags. There is a proposal for FEMA funds to provide funding for PPE, sanitizing supplies, school ventilation upgrades, and testing, which would make the ESSER 2 funding go further for K through 12, as well as the higher ed funding go further for universities and colleges. In addition, the Biden administration is working to ensure that schools, districts have adequate funding to provide quality distance learning, including technology, tech support, and broadband access. This is a priority in the new administration. Beyond COVID funding, I wanted to highlight the upcoming REST DLT annual grant program put forth by the USDA Rural Utilities Service. And this is funding for interactive real-time distance learning and telehealth projects. Nearly all types of organizations are eligible except for federal organizations, sole proprietors, and organizations in coastal barrier zones. Organizations in rural areas with high economic need are the best fit for this grant funding. And this is a very consistent and reliable source of funding, something you can rely on for years to come. Our team is well versed in what makes a successful REST DLT grant, and we'd love to support you. Now we'll look into the details, budget and expenditures. Funds must go towards hardware, software, primarily being used for distance learning and/or telemedicine. Up to 20% of the budget can be spent on broadband-related expenses. Funds must be utilized within 3 years, and a 15% match is a requirement. From a timing perspective, typically this grant is announced by the end of January. 2021 is proving to be a unique year in many ways as the COVID pandemic and a new administration taking over has pushed this timeline a bit, but we do anticipate movement by the end of the quarter. Once it is officially announced, the application period is either 60 or 90 days after the program is posted. And a look back at highlights from 2020. $71.5 million were awarded in total, with a range from $50,000 to $1 million per awardee. Thank you so much for the time today. Reach out to your Poly rep with any questions you may have or to get connected with the Poly Grants Assistance Program team for support.